It's ultimately the quantity of nutrient recovered by a crop relative to the nutrients that is applied, I suppose, from the soil itself through background nitrogen, applied fertilizers and manures, and ultimately how much is recovered in the end product that you're selling, whether it's milk or meat or crops. So efficient use of nitrogen is essential to achieving maximum crop growth and achieving a greater return on each kilo of fertilizer you buy.
It's great to be back with another Environment Edge podcast, and you're very welcome to the show.
Farmers have to deal with a lot of new terms that can be confusing. So to shed light on the difference between nitrogen balance and nutrient use efficiency and its importance to farm economics and environment, Leonard Betts, Teagasc Signpost Climate Advisor, joins us for a chat.
I'm Cathal Summers.
And I'm Deirdre Glynn,
your Teagasc Sustainability Advisors. And we're back for another Environment Edge podcast, number 100. And just to let you know, Deirdre and I wanted to thank you all to all our listeners for your continued support. The Environment Edge podcast has been running since 2021, and we look forward to chatting to you all in the future. So once again, here we go.
Leonard, you're really welcome to the show. So policy aims for, say, lower nitrogen use to meet climate targets. So you have a whole load of strategies you're farmed for. You've got your ag climatise, and everything is targeted about significant reductions in nitrogen use. So Leonard, can you tell me a little bit about nitrogen balance and how it's calculated on the farm?
It's basically farm gate inputs of nitrogen, such as your purchased fertilizer and feed, livestock, and imported organic manures, minus your outputs in the form of nitrogen. So in the form of milk, livestock, manures exported. So obviously there's nitrogen in everything. So it's a balance between the two of those, worked out, I suppose, on a per hectare basis. And you get your figure based on that. So I suppose it's an indicator of potential risk of loss of nitrogen to our environment. So obviously the aim would be to try and reduce that as best we can through tailored advice for a farm.
You're meeting farmers now at the moment. Are you meeting them one-on-one, or are you meeting them in groups to have a look at the how it's utilised and used and what the inputs are on the farm?
No, currently we're meeting one-to-one.
Oh, that's excellent.
Yeah, so we're using, I suppose, the AgNav platform, which I suppose it's an online tool with the support of Borbia, ICBF, and Teagasc, and obviously the Department of Agriculture, to help farmers to devise strategies to reduce their carbon footprint. So farmers are in the Borbia sustainability program. From that data that they input, the AgNav report, we can see what fertilizer they used in the year, what meal they used, their stocking rate, the grazing dates, and the slurry application rates and dates. So they all feed in to ultimately to the figures for the year for that farmer.
So when you're meeting the farmer on this occasion, it makes them cognizant of what kind of nitrogen they're using and where they're using it, and it's a whole process, isn't it?
Correct. It gets them thinking outside the box, because they all automatically lean towards fertilizer nitrogen.
Yeah,
but you have to explain that, like, obviously that's the primary source of nitrogen in chemical form. Then you have it in organic form for your slurry and your farmer manure. Increasing nitrogen is coming maybe from clover-based swards as nitrogen is fixed from the atmosphere. Dung and urine patches are also a source of nitrogen during the year, which is obviously influenced by stocking rate. So I suppose all that feeds in to your balance on the farm for the year.
And you can see how this could be confusing for farmers. Probably new enough kind of terminology that we're talking about in balance, Leonard. And I suppose just to get straight then, so on the farm then we have, say, our cows or our cattle, and that's the in-farm nitrogen, and any of the dung and slurry comes out of them, lands on the farm. So that's all in-house. But when you're talking about inputs, then you're talking about the chemical fertilizers or feed that we buy in nuts or cubes or whatever. If you buy bulls or cattle onto the farm or cows, that's all inputs, and maybe buy silage in if we had a bad year or something. And maybe if you import slurry. So they're all the kind of inputs we're talking about, aren't they?
Correct. Yeah. All that is in it.
And they all have kind of specific then values of nitrogen in them, different values, I suppose.
Correct.
And that's all thrown in. And then I suppose then the outputs you're after talking about some milk and meat. And if we even for likes of someone who sells silage off the farm, something like that. And then you just minus the inputs from the outputs and you have the balance what's inside the farm. I suppose the question I have here is, so we have all this nitrogen in the farm and we're trying to, I suppose, whatever's left in is kind of like an additional surplus of nitrogen, is it?
Correct. And I suppose the main point, Cathal, to this as well is the accuracy of the data. So
Yeah.
we're basing it on what the farmer tells the Board BA inspector. So I suppose, as you're aware, there's no obligation for a farmer to give factual information to the auditor. So the data across the country, in some cases, wouldn't be overly accurate. Now, in time, we're going to have obviously the fertilizer database, which will feed in actual fertilizer consumption. So in a lot of cases, the data is not particularly accurate, and then you can get a figure that's very much skewed for that farmer in terms of his nitrogen balance or nitrogen surplus. But you explain to the farmer, look, your figure is skewed because we can clearly see here that figure, whether it's for chemical fertilizer or meal usage, is just not a realistic figure.
Like if a farmer puts a bit of time into this, how important that figure could be, because that balance that you're talking about, that's the bit could be liable to be lost through gaseous emissions or nitrate leaching or whatever. So it's money down the drain if we don't keep on top of it, isn't it?
Oh, correct. Exactly. So I suppose all farmers are driven by profit, and a lot are driven by environmental practices. So I suppose whichever approach you want to adopt, but ultimately the loss of nitrogen is a loss environmentally and it's a loss to the farmer's pocket.
The farmers are working off a nutrient management plan, like Teagasc provides the services, a nutrient management plan. Do they use the plan? Are they following it? Like, what are you seeing in the plans? Is there a move towards, say, protected urea compounds when the advisors are asking them to use specific types of nitrogen on the farm?
Yes, Deirdre, I suppose it's very case by case, but in general, yes, farmers are cognizant of the nutrient management plan, but a lot don't put enough effort and time into it. So they know they have a certain fertilizer type that they should use in their farm based on the soil reports, but not all are actively doing that. There may be whatever they're meant to spread, they're only spreading a third of the P&K allowance or half it. And obviously then you're explaining, well, you're clearly going to grow less grass as a result. So hence your animals will still eat the same amount. So hence you're going to basically be buying in meal to make up the balance or buying in bought in silage, which is obviously more expensive. So as you know, farmers are busy, they're creatures of habit. So you have to kind of get them to sit down and take a step back and say, look, this is the approach you need to adopt going forward, because grazed grass is your cheapest feed, and that will ultimately drive the performance and efficiency of our farming system.
Yeah, I suppose as well, like, and I know we were driving at home in Kilkenny, that it's a balanced approach to soil fertility that contributes to the climate smart agriculture, really, isn't it? Like healthy soils.
Yeah, correct.
Healthy soils, obviously, it's going to utilize your applied nitrogen better, and that'll in turn then reduce the amount of losses to associated greenhouse gas emissions.
Exactly. And obviously last year was a difficult year weather-wise, so it impacted maybe on the performance of fertilizer and mineralization of nitrogen in the soil, with poaching events and soil temperatures being lower. So you've explained that to farmers, that's all impacting on performance of fertilizers.
I suppose another thing as well is lime, it can reduce the amount of nitrous oxide emissions. So liming to achieve the proper pH as well for proper nitrogen utilization and for nitrogen use efficiency can reduce emissions as well.
Correct. We emphasize it's our cheapest nutrient, first thing to rectify.
Yeah.
So yeah, we're reminding it the whole time. And at farm level, they're inclined to leave it till the autumn. But then you say to them, look, it could be wet in the autumn, you'll miss another calendar year. Why not try and attack it now as soon as you can and get the benefits in this calendar year and this grazing year?
What is the nitrogen use efficiency, Leonard? You know, there is a definition out there, and people kind of find it hard to get under the bonnet of it, really, don't they?
Oh, they do, yeah, they do. Look, I suppose it's ultimately the quantity of nutrient recovered by a crop relative to the nutrients that is applied, I suppose, from the soil itself through background nitrogen, applied fertilizers and manures, and ultimately how much is recovered in the end product that you're selling, whether it's milk or meat or crops. So efficient use of nitrogen is essential to achieving maximum crop growth and achieving a greater return on each kilo of fertilizer you buy. So having, as you say, a healthy soil, following your fertilizer plan will help to optimize your nitrogen usage efficiency.
So if we do our job better on the farm, every time, like we, instead of using a splash plate, we use a low emission spreader, or maybe instead of spreading nitrogen at the wrong time of the year, where the grass is not growing as well, and we spread it at a time that you're getting better uptake. All these several steps that you're after talking about, better fertility. So if we do everything a little bit better, we're saving more nitrogen, and it's not getting lost to the atmosphere, and that means we're getting a better nitrogen use efficiency. Am I right in saying that?
Yeah, 100%. So I just say it's a combination of several actions, so they'll all ultimately achieve it. So I suppose appropriate stocking rate. So I suppose the dung and urine patches, a guy that's overstocked has a lot of dung and urine patches, and that's a big leakage of nitrogen through the urine. Obviously, slurry nitrogen and watching the rate and the timing in the spring, and maybe testing your slurry to see what nutrients are in it, and you can reduce your chemical nitrogen accordingly. The low emission slurry obviously is now in for practically everyone once you're above 100 organic nitrogen, so that's bringing a large cohort of farmers. Reducing concentrate usage, obviously, that's all back to growing grass and stocking rate. If you're overstocked, you're obviously going to feed more meals. So is that sustainable long term? You have to question that. I suppose the crude protein in the ration, less is more again, because it's coming out in the urine patches. Optimizing the pK and lime indexes. Sulfur, I suppose, is another big one. It improves nitrogen efficiency. So we know there's a response to applied sulfur on all soil types, but particularly on free draining soils. So some farmers are not aware of this, and they're missing out in terms of grass growth as a result. Obviously, clover, potential to reduce chemical nitrogen. And then I suppose grass reseeding, the newer grass varieties are better uptaking nitrogen compared to older swards.
The more we grow, the more nitrogen we uptake, and the less we lose then, really, isn't it?
Yeah, correct, 100%.
Yeah. And we're on a Signpost Series webinar this morning, and Patrick Forstall was on there, and he was talking about, you're after mentioning urine a few times, and there's a lot of nitrogen comes out in urine. If it comes out the wrong time of year, especially autumn, it's a problem. But they're saying plantain now can help reduce that loss now as well, which is great news for farmers.
Correct. Excellent.
Just wondering, so we're after talking about nitrogen use and efficiency now, and nitrogen balance, and we know the difference between those now. One is kind of accounting to see, how much of a surplus of nitrogen you might have on your farm when you're working, and the other is telling you how efficient you are at taking up the nitrogen. Are there kind of figures, average figures, maybe a dairy or a beef farmer should be aiming for, or what? How do you benchmark yourself, how well you're doing, I suppose?
Yeah, I think the national average nitrogen figure is 158 for nitrogen, and it's around 10 kilos for phosphorus. So at farm level, you'd see some farmers, and they might be negative for P, and it would a major area of concern if a farmer wasn't index 4. So obviously at index 4, he's not allowed to spread chemical P. So in that scenario, I suppose he should be minus for P because he's mining P off the farm. But if he's negative for P and he's index 1 or 2 for P, well, then he's clearly scoring an own goal in terms of grass growth. So I suppose the figures can kind of highlight an issue straight away for a farmer. And obviously if the nitrogen figure is really, really way above the average, national average, why is it? What's going on? And maybe is he clearly overstocked and buying a lot of meal and fertilizer to try and sustain a stocking rate that's not really sustainable long term.
There's a huge amount of variation in the amount of weather and in the last couple of years. And I suppose the Agricultural Catchments Programme have highlighted that these conditions, such as droughts and heavy rainfall, can also lead to the build-up of soil nitrogen, and then I suppose losses from that. Are the farmers adapting their management practices, in line with these variable conditions?
I think there's huge scope for them to do more.
Uh,
There's maybe a bit of a disconnect there. Like some will still say, why isn't there an open season? Because oftentimes in November, December time, perfect weather conditions, it's dry, it would suit, we wouldn't do damage to the soil, they're trafficable. Why can't we spread slurry? And you have to explain, look, that's the main leakage time in the year, because ultimately it's the wettest time of the year. So spreading nutrients late in the year, it's banned for a reason, because ultimately they will be lost. So when you explain it to them that way, they kind of, they see the understanding of it, all right. But there is a bit of a disconnect.
Yeah, I'm just looking at a graph here now that someone sent me there a month or two ago, and it's the link between surplus N that you're talking about, or the N balance, I suppose, the additional N left in the soil at the wrong time of year that you're talking about, and nitrate leaching. And like I know a lot of our more intensive farmers in irrigation are very, very, very concerned about getting their water quality right now, and they're doing a lot of work to trying to improve that, to try and, I suppose, hold and maintain the irrigation. And I suppose the big thing I'm looking at the graph is if there's surplus N, the more surplus N there is, there's a direct correlation with the amount of nitrate getting leached in that period you're talking about. So that must be a concern amongst some of the farmers you're talking to.
100%. Yeah, they're very cognizant of it. And obviously we're facing a 5% chemical nitrogen cut for some stocking rates this year in 2025. There was a 10% cut a few years ago. So you have to explain to farmers that basically they have to survive going forward in a reduced chemical nitrogen environment. And we know as part of the government's climate action plan, there'll be limits on chemical fertilizer. And nitrogen is going to be limited to around 300,000 tons per annum. And we are dropping our figures compared to 2018, but some individual farmers will be okay because their PK and lime levels are okay, but those that aren't will not be able to survive in a lower nitrogen environment. So you have to try and get them on the right path so that they'll be able to cope going forward.
That's that nitrogen use efficiency that you've been talking about. That, like, I think from what you're saying and from what the figures I'm looking at, grass growth, if you do improve your nitrogen use efficiency that you're talking about here, you can still grow the same grass with reduced nitrogen. Just look at some of the figures, some of our grass producing farms, the nitrogen use efficiency is low. It could be in the low 20s even. And I think our targets are trying to get farmers up to 35% nitrogen use efficiency, which would make a huge, would be really beneficial in what you're talking about, that gap between, reduced chemical and still growing the same crop.
100%. As you say, it can still be grown, just ultimately lose less, and there's still some left to drive grass growth.
Leonard, the livestock excretion rate and the banding as well seems to have had an influence on the management of organic nitrogen on farms. And also, I suppose, crude protein limits, like it's now, the 14%, 15%. So that's also had an impact then, because they've had to reduce the amount of protein that's fed, and they've also had an increase in the amount of organic nitrogen associated with the three different excretion rates as well.
Correct. Yeah. No, yeah. And some farmers, obviously, depending on what category they're in, that they feel they're being penalised. But you explain the background of why it's all there, and ultimately the long-term gain of reducing it, and ultimately back to trying to grow grass. So I suppose Teagasc have a kind of a roadmap for all enterprises, kind of 12 steps they can do at farm level to reduce their carbon footprint, and soil fertility is one of the actions for all enterprises, because ultimately it's going to grow grass, your cheapest feed, and make a farmer more sustainable and a business more robust going forward, I suppose, to maybe to deal with price fluctuations that will automatically happen with output prices.
Yeah, and I suppose the extended close period as well. For fertilizer application, I suppose it also reduces the amount of nitrogen loss over the winter period as well.
Of course, yeah.
Leonard, I think your Signpost Climate Advisory team are doing a lot of really good work, and I'm delighted to hear that you're getting one-to-one with farmers and talking about, trying to get that message across and the end balance and the nitrogen use efficiency and what we need to do to achieve reduced nitrous oxide emission targets and reduced nitrate leaching. And I think it's a huge benefit for farmers. So just want to thank you for coming on to the show today, and wish you the best luck in your future work, and we might chat to you again in the future.
No bother, Carl. Thank you. Thanks, Deirdre.
So there you have it. Tune in next time to hear more interesting chats and discussion.
Myself and Deirdre will be back in 2 weeks' time, but do give us a review on Apple and Spotify or wherever you get your podcasts. Thanks for listening to the Environment Edge podcast.